she was supposing that I sit in the portable sauna with just my head sticking out, but I said that's not going to work.
That could, well, I don't know. There are some things that are a good idea, but you don't want to walk around like that for hours.
So how's your Halloween?
It's good. There's really not much Halloween here in France, but
okay.
but we do it for like our granddaughter and a few other people. So we go a little bit with the spirit, but there are not very many trick-or-treaters. Hi, Sam.
Hello, Sam.
Hey, seeing this, I need to go off camera and go put something on.
Well, you don't have to, but it's an option.
I only dropped by for a very short while because one of my meetings got canceled. So
okay, it's all right.
Anyway.
Hi, Ron. Hi, Heidi.
Hi. A Carnevale today. What
Trick or treat.
Okay.
Yeah, well, just to set a little atmosphere here. So
the candy's in the other room, or else I would.
I have candy too if you want some.
What?
Hello, Dave. I have candy too if you want some.
Okay.
If you tell us what you're dressed up as.
That's Halloween thing.
It's Halloween. That's the.
That's never comes through to me.
That's why we're dressed funny. It's
okay.
There's not much Halloween here either, but we try to keep it alive a little bit.
Try to be American.
Yeah, a little bit. Anyway, hello everybody.
Hello.
So today the idea is to explore the felt sense, whatever that means, or felt senses in relation to a group conversation. So the idea in my mind is it works well if each of us has some kind of sense of whether what's happening is working or not, whether things are being set at approximately the right time, whether things are evolving in some kind of interesting way, and that's not about sort of your opinion or whether or your agenda, but it's more that we maybe have a sense of is something really evolving here, and that even can be important comes out of a somewhat opinionated idea about what our meeting should be. So the ideal for me is in the direction of like a Bohmian dialogue where we're sort of looking at something in the midst of our meeting and trying to explore what that is. Or for those of you familiar with Theory U, it's a level 4 conversation where we're trying to get a sense of what's trying to emerge here. And that's contrasted to other levels where we're just sort of either trying to follow the rules or do what we normally do and trying to do it correctly, or we're trying to sort of win an argument by presenting our opinion or our facts as convincingly as possible and trying to pick the best idea. It's another level. Another one is to try to hear from everybody, all stakeholders, to hear what's going on for everybody and try to somehow make something that works for all of us. And all of those are meaningful in different contexts. But then the fourth level would be that we together are more looking at what is it that's here, what is it that's trying to emerge. It's looking a little bit more towards the future. And particularly for that, it becomes more interesting and useful to have some kind of sense of whether we're doing that or whether we're just sort of being smart or trying to interview everybody or trying to sort of rattle off something we know. So, I mean, there are lots of ways of not doing that. So one way of doing it is to have a sense of Is this it or not? And one way of exploring it is that we just start, and then at various points we sort of stop and try to sense into how is this going? Did this thing that just happened work, not work? And it can be both positive and negative. It's not about people doing it wrong. It's just as much about sometimes somebody does something or says something that gets us to move forward, go deeper, whatever we call it. Somebody might succeed in sort of magically transforming the conversation into something better. And the point then is to sort of stop and look at, well, how did that happen? How does that kind of magic work? So let's just start by being quiet, and that sort of goes well in that context. So just take a moment, take a deep breath, and feel the chair under you, and notice the space you're in, and relax and become aware of your breathing and of the space that we share among us. We're all both in our own space, in our own chair, and we're also somehow sharing a space together. And that's part of what we're going to explore. So now let's have a conversation. We didn't set a topic, so we are hoping that one will emerge as we start speaking. And I'm thinking that one possibility is just the topic of the conversation itself. I presented a certain angle on it, a certain way of doing it. That doesn't mean that that's correct or that's what one should do. So there's maybe room for talking about what's the point of that? Is what should a conversation be, and what could it be?
I was kind of thinking of that as a topic, although I didn't really voice it, or just kind of. And I think the angle I see it from is to see this conversation as a generative space. So maybe the topic in that light would be the way I'm looking at it right now.
So then a question is, what makes it more generative, and what is that, and maybe what makes it not so?
Some of the things you said kind of set it up and seed it. So that's kind of how it works, I think. Somebody has to kind of sow the seeds, you know, and you did that, and you're still doing it.
What do you think, Dave?
I'm kind of curious. You threw us into level 4 without really explaining levels 1, 2, and 3. So I think it would be useful to me to understand what I've never heard about a level 4 conversation. So I would love to hear what you think that means, or what you mean by that.
I will explain it a bit more, and now it would have been nice if I had a graphic ready for it. But anyway, the idea is that we're trying to sort of get to the bottom of the U, sort of go deeper. And the level 1 is the most sort of, we could say, superficial one. Level 1 is trying to sort of enforce the rules. Like if we're having a meeting, just to see what's correct to do. That would in some situations be the correct thing to do. If we're mechanics in a race and we just need to quickly like change the wheels of a tire when the tires of a car. When it comes in, we need to follow the rules. We need to be clear, and we synchronize our watches. The first 3 seconds we do this. So the conversation would be about, do you got it right or not? If not, let me correct you and refer to the rules, kind of thing. That's a level 1. So it's just you're sort of channeling the rule book. Then level 2 is where there are different points of view, and we grant that there are different points of view and we would like to hear them. So that's kind of about making your case for what you believe in. Here I have facts, I am motivated, this has an urgency, and I'm trying to sort of present that to the rest of you, and several other people are doing that.
So that would be like a courtroom or a debate?
That would be like a courtroom, or debate is a clear example of that you're trying to present your case, and there are other possibilities. The opposition presents theirs, and there might be more than 2, might be several. And that does involve ideally listening. It's not just that I'm gonna present my case. I'm also listening to the other parties. What are they actually saying? And okay, they actually have a point. So maybe it's better we do it your way. But it's a little bit competitive. It sort of becomes somebody's way. And the people who dominate it are the people who have their elevator pitch ready, and they know why, and they have the facts to support it. So that's level 2. So there, the outcome might be sort of picking the best idea. Then level 3 would be a stakeholder sort of, we're trying to hear from all stakeholders, like who's everybody involved. So that brings in empathy. We're trying to be empathic for all points of view. So not even just the people who are here, but everybody involved. So let's think about the animals. Let's think about everything. Or in a conversation, it would be, let's hear from all of us, kind of thing. So you often see that in this kind of conversation, that somebody's trying to be nice and hear, okay, we didn't hear from Sam. Let's hear what Sam has to say. So we sort of put somebody on the spot to be inclusive, which sometimes is very helpful, is what is needed. In other situations, it could be a distraction. If we're trying to sort of keep a certain focus or a certain current, then the person who hasn't spoken might go off on a long rambling thing because they don't really have anything to say. But it basically is based on empathy. You're trying to be nice and include everybody. So that's level 3. And then level 4. Level 4 is that we're not focusing on what any of us particularly has ready to say or our opinions. We're more looking at a situation, maybe a problem or an opportunity together. We're trying to focus on that and trying to see what is ready to happen, what's sort of the next thing. Not how did I solve it in the past, but it could include that I talk about my experience and what happened. And that tends to also include what do we feel, what do we sense. It can include some other senses of trying to sense what is this thing here. And
is there a level 5 or
there's no level 5 in that. So this is relatively straight out of Theory U from Otto Scharmer. I only look at it slightly differently, but there are other disciplines that would address the level 4, like Bohmian dialogue. I consider something that would be level 4 also. In Bohmian dialogue, one doesn't talk particularly about one's opinions or try to convince each other. We're looking at something together, and we're trying to see what sort of emerges among us.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, I don't know if you know about the Quaker meeting.
Yeah, so it's in that direction too. This is, by the way, not saying that all conversations have to be level 4 as the only correct thing. I mean, there are correct situations where the others are more appropriate. I mean, if something really needs to be done right now, it doesn't necessarily, isn't always the best to go into this sort of slow meditative space of looking at the future. I mean, sometimes you need to take some action like right now and hear whoever has a solution and pick one. or do what's the standard thing is. It depends.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I think this is also the hardest one to do because the others tend to get in the way. We very easily drop back to some of the other ones, like somebody has something important to say and suddenly we're in level 2 and they're trying to convince us.
There's a really beautiful phrase they use I've heard it used in relation to the Quaker meeting, which is simply, don't speak unless you are improving on the silence. And to me, I find it helpful.
I think it's totally that encompasses it in many ways. So like before speaking, and that gets into sort of this felt sense. That's the topic here of how do you really feel that this will improve on the silence? And that doesn't necessarily mean I have something really important or I know all about this. It's something else, which is a little bit fuzzy what that is. So that's what I'm hoping for us to look for, having more of a sense of that, whether we are in the current of that or whether we are getting off track somehow. And that gets to sound a little sort of mystical and fuzzy because it's not, are we on topic with what was stated? That's really more of a level 1 kind of thing. Level 1 would be to ask, okay, what is the outcome? What is it we're supposed to do? What are the rules? And let's try to follow them. That's more level 1. So it's a little harder to clamp down and enforce because it's not the kind of thing that's enforced. Anyway, this is to explore what that might be and how we might do it.
Well, you asked us to think about space. I'm kind of curious, Ron, about your space. It looks like you're underground. I can't really, looking at your space is really intriguing. It looks like you're in I don't know where you are, a shed?
It's just an unfinished wall in our house.
Oh, yeah, it looks like you created some kind of chamber for yourself.
It is kind of. It's probably the least finished room, so it kind of is my chamber, I guess. And so those are furring strips on there, and it's just an old brick building. It must be over 100 years old, I guess. It's a little bit rickety, and there's the usual Christmas stocking that I got from my daughter last Christmas. It's still hanging there.
Excellent. Thank you.
So just as a test, I'm not saying anything was wrong here or right, but as a test of sort of checking what moves the conversation forward. So here we're starting to talk a little bit about the felt sense, and then Dave comments on Ron's room, and Ron responds to that. So I personally like that, but I wanted to sort of just put some attention on, was that a distraction? Did we now go off in a totally different direction, or did that bring some new awareness into it, a sense of space? Maybe. What do you guys feel?
I felt distracted, but I was trying in my mind to try and work this notion of space into this topic. So at the same time as I was doing that and thinking about Dave's question, I was thinking about, if I think that way, am I in level 1? And so therefore, should I think this way? And at the same time, still thinking, well, this is kind of getting us a little bit off topic, but there was no topic. So why should I be thinking that?
For me, I think Dave did exactly the right thing, because a conversation level 4 is not started immediately by people who have hardly come together. So I think we need an initialization or something of a conversation. That was also, now I'm talking about my experience, when you try to make us speak at the beginning, I thought, oops, immediately dive into level 4 without even having sensed into the room and into the other people. I feel it difficult. And the normal way is that we say something nice about or something interesting. I find the wall even interesting. I thought it is wood behind him, And so that's leading then into a conversation. And I often think level 1 is the beginning, and then we go, hopefully, or not. So for me, it was not a distraction. Also, I thought, oh, we should have done it differently.
So maybe an important point about sensing is just getting to know each other.
Yeah, we didn't have an check-in or anything, so just bang. So.
Sam?
But again, that triggers in me that if we have this assumed check-in phase, in software, I guess there's a term called waterfall model, which is you do stage 1, then you do stage 2, then you do stage 3, then you do stage 4. And at each time you have to figure out, are you done with the previous stage? Whereas I think life is more concurrent. And if you want to take a learning model or an agile model, then everything's happening at the same time. So one of the ways I felt Dave was being introduced to me was asking that question. One of the ways I was actually introducing myself to Dave, since he's the only one here I haven't actually met yet, was to make my response. So I think there's ways to introduce yourself in a kind of a meandering way, which is, you know, not the level 1 way, but kind of a more indirect way to sort of introduce oneself, which does not necessarily have to follow the, okay, let's take, 2 minutes to each check in on what our favorite color is, So I think that to me, assuming that we have a check-in is kind of a rule-based approach. Over.
May I say, very pleased to meet you, Sam.
Likewise, Dave. Always I like to ask when I meet somebody new, what time zone are you in?
I'm in St. Louis, so it's about 11:20 for me in the mid-morning. Thanks for asking.
Thanks.
And I'm curious about all of you as well. I think Heidi and Fleming are in Europe, I think. This gives me a rough idea, but I'm not sure. I don't know about Chaz. I think you're in India. No? See,
He's in the UK somewhere.
Okay, London. That's right. I remember now.
And Hanneli in South Africa, and we discovered that she actually does daylight saving differently, so that it ended up being an hour different for her instead of the same as normally. Now, I would like to say what I liked about, like, Dave asking Ron and Ron answering was, well, one thing I liked was it was short. So you could say it went in a different direction, but we could also say that it brought in some sharing and something in common and being aware of the surroundings. I thought all of that was good. And what was good was that it was short. If it had become that Ron had gone off in a 5-minute explanation about how this barn or whatever it was built, well, maybe that, I don't know. I mean, for me, the timing is important to it. Like almost anything is fine if one doesn't obsessively hold on to the mic and keep it going and going. So anything, like whatever, something that happened today, what you see, even an opinion, anything, as long as you don't, as long as you hold it relatively lightly, you put it into the space, and maybe the tapestry is formed by all these different pieces. So, so there's a sort of a rhythm, timing thing, which makes anything work, I think.
Yeah, for me I was dipping into the same, so I didn't really hear heard the words. So I was in the energy of what was being shared between Ron and Dave, and also Sam. So it was very interesting that I sort of dipped into another level of communication and was more into the sensory, visceral part than the words itself. So there was no distraction. It was simply the flow of the energy.
But then what came up for you if you were not hearing the words?
No, I was just feeling it in my body, how it was moving, and it was moving from the middle of my body towards my neck, on my spine. So I was simply aware of the movement, not trying to cognitize it and give it meaning. So if the frame, in my experience, if the energy was stuck, I would have felt something would have felt uncomfortable, but it was just simply going with the flow of it. And the feeling part was actually just sensing into it was good. It didn't matter what was discussed.
I think that's always there, and we just typically we don't really notice it too much while we're talking. So if we don't even hear what we're saying, in a way, we're still hearing a lot that's underneath it.
This level 4 thing, Fleming, you and I have talked a little bit about Finnish culture or Finland on Facebook, but it reminds me of if you've ever been to Finland, there's sort of a cultural expectation. Number one, that you keep it somewhat short. Number two, that you stop. You let there be silence after someone has spoken, for everyone can absorb it. Number three, you leave people time to think, lots of time. Generous compared to what I'm used to. Amounts of time to think before responding. There's there's beautiful silence in Finland, and it's cultural. It's not just the forest and the pine trees, which is also beautiful silence, and the lakes and all that, but there's something in the culture as well that's very, I wonder if it has to do with appreciation of nature, because there's a lot of that in that culture as well.
What I notice also is, by having a little time, it allows me to sort of notice what I feel about it. So like here, like Dave asked Ron said something, and there was then space in that. So I could notice, how did that work? Doesn't mean I have to start talking about it, but it allows me to get a sense of that. And if I felt that there was something that needed to be discussed there was space for me to bring it up or not, so that it allows responding and sensing inside. Whereas if you went off on a chain of like 5 different topics, I get overloaded. I felt things about each one maybe, but there's no room for doing anything with it. But if it's one at a time, one can personally deal with it, and as a group, we might change course or not.
There's also something that kind of comes out of it, part of the keep it short and the leave time to think. What I think part of what people do is they think about their thought and how to express it, and they come up with much shorter but much richer, almost sometimes even poetic expressions, because they're just slowing down everything.
And each word has more impact.
Yeah. Sam, you mentioned there's something Asian there. Do you want to expand on that? You said it in the chat.
No.
Okay.
I'd be happy to, but I'm experimenting with the silence.
That made me smile. I don't know why that made me just giggle. I enjoyed it. Heidi, what did they say?
That's my question.
Yeah, almost nothing. I was used to, when there are people with me on the tree and we are picking, that we have conversations, and they just didn't. Sometimes some Finnish word, when I try to enter with a topic, 3-4 words and then silence.
It's so funny. It was one of my favorite things about Finland, actually, because I hate small talk. I'm terrible at small talk. I can't talk about sports and baseball and so it was so I loved Finland because you never have to, no one ever expects you to talk. It's something very, it's like a warm bath for me to go into that culture personally. I don't know why.
And then for our culture is strange because we think it's an awkward silence, and it might not even be. It's for us, but for them, maybe not, you know?
That was the biggest thing I had to learn, that it's not awkward. And once you've sort of absorbed that, it's actually beautiful.
When I first came to this country, I'm talking about the US, and I was reunited with my dad because he came here first. One of the things I found him saying was that he kept talking about how people kept talking and talking and talking, and in the vernacular now, you might actually say yammering. They're just gibbering, okay? And the problem with that is then you can't really get at anything quote unquote meaningful or deeper or more personal or more felt. And that was something my dad expressed continually for decades. And I'm finding that, you know, when I go and have dinner with, and I'm not going to mention who, if the dinner conversation is always at this very superficial, oh, how's the weather? You know, what's the score of the game? You know, what did you do today? What did you pick up at the mall? Did you have that flavor ice cream? You know, it's like, how is that really a way to get connected? I mean, it does on a superficial level. Maybe it's necessary, but it doesn't seem like it allows the sense of, Dave, what does it really mean to be Asian? Da-da, da-da. You know?
Where do you come from, Sam, if you are not American? I mean, you may be, but originally?
I was born in Taiwan.
Sorry, I'm not sure about.
I was born in Taiwan, and I turned 6 after I got to the US. And by the way, a lot of people in my dad's and mom's generation on Taiwan have a very strong Japanese influence because there was a very long Japanese occupation of Taiwan before the Second World War, FYI. So there's a lot of Japanese influence in my parents and the way they think and the way they talk and the way they interact. And they spent a lot of time in Japan. They have a lot of thinking and, you know, philosophy from Japan. And so I've picked up a little bit of that. Not a lot, but a little bit.
I've noticed it's getting harder and harder in the US to go anywhere where there's not, even if you're quiet, there's jabbering in your head. It's even at the airport, the TV is jabbering and gibbering now, and everywhere you go. And my wife turns the TV on to keep her company. I can't read, you know. To me, that jabbering makes it almost impossible to have a dialogue with yourself sometimes, or even to sit and think and reflect. And I wonder if, you know, maybe some of our problems that we're having in our society is because we actually don't have enough time to just think for ourselves, or space.
So I'm certainly wondering how to have more of that space, and I mean, I want it to be just a short distance away, so it's very easy to step into that sort of relaxed, peaceful space. And I imagine I can maintain I'm imagining I'm ready to do that at any point. That I might be deluding myself. I don't know. Because I also notice how fragile it is. Like it's easily messed up by somebody who comes in. So what about them Dodgers or whatever it is that's going on, or fucking Trump or whatever it is? Like, but there's lots of things that sort of takes it in a different direction. Which to some degree is those other levels. Like, what are the rules? What are we trying to do here? What exactly is it? What are you trying to accomplish with it? Please explain. There's lots of things that take it away. So I'm wondering how to make it solid enough that one can step into that and others can be there in that space with you without it continuously being interrupted or diluted or becoming something else. And I don't have a clear answer to it yet.
it might be able to include a lot of something else. It just is. And if there's idle chat in the midst, a little bit anyway, in the midst of it, that's just part of it.
Well, as I said earlier, if it's short, anything is fine. Like if a little kid runs through and it's funny and something off the wall thing happens and it's short, then no problem. So it's more if something or someone tries to dominate the space, it's a problem. Otherwise, whatever happens, a jet plane flies over and that messes up the silence for a moment, but nobody has a problem with that. Like if it was a meditation, you would just be aware, oh, the sound, and how do I feel about that? That's perfectly fine. But if there are hundreds of jet planes flying over and for the next hour, it might, I mean, there's a short thing that's okay, and something longer or too insistent is not the same feeling.
And even if something is, you might say, inappropriate, or it upsets the vibe that we're I guess we're talking about and experiencing, hopefully. Even if there is something that upsets it, I just always have, for so many years, have continued to follow the advice of the music educator Howard Roberts, and one of the great things he said was, recover quickly from mistakes.
You think there's something about doing this online that makes it harder? Because I mean, it's so easy to be distracted with in ways that nobody here might be aware of. You know, things you could do with your hands, or I think it's harder than being in a room together, a little bit.
It's harder.
It seems to be harder to pick up the vibe.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, otherwise, I have, and I'm sure most of you have had the experience of walking into the room with a certain vibe. Like if you walk into a darkened room where a bunch of people are sitting quietly in a circle, you probably would sit down quietly too, or you would sneak quietly out there. You would not jump in and go, what about them Dodgers? You wouldn't normally if you're reasonably sane. But the same thing is likely to happen in an online space. I mean, we've tried it here where not all of us agreed on what the vibe was. Like
sorry.
Go ahead, but I mean, we had, for example, an experiment which is just be quiet the whole time and see what happens.
Well, in the interest of it, just in the spirit of experiment, I'm just curious what happens. Is there something that happens if we all lean in like this? Will it feel different?
That's kind of different.
Yeah, that makes me smile. I see more smiles somehow.
Yeah, are we a little closer now? Well, I have in the past found it incredibly difficult to deliberately create this sort of quiet space. I once tried to do it, well, that's maybe harder, but I once tried to do it with a text chat room, with the idea being to explain very thoroughly Bohemian dialogue, with everybody had to have read some documents, have understood what it was, and sort of sign that they get this sort of idea, and we would make a sacred space where we do dialogue. And to come in here, you had to go through several steps, and I set it up technically that way. You come into a sort of 4-room where you needed to again be reminded of, now you're going to step into the inner room where there's a dialogue, and this is how it works. And now you go through the next step, and still half of the people would show up sort of doing small talk or complaining about things and not plugging into the space. So I realized how incredibly difficult it is. I thought it worked for me. Like I would sort of get into the vibe and step in, and it felt a certain way, and I recognized that feeling very well. But others didn't do it.
Two thoughts. One, I am perennially confused when someone says that they're holding space or that they have this felt sense of the group feeling or the group sense or the group gestalt. I never really understand what that truly means. And I'm open to understanding it, but I think there's a lot of projection in it. That's one of the thoughts that I have. So that's thought number one. Thought number two is if you instruct people ill-advisedly, often you get, of course, the opposite result. And I was reminded by one management exercise I took way back when I was just a kind of a fledgling responsible person for other people, is that there was an exercise where several of us, like 5 or 6 people, were given a bar, a long 6-foot bar, and each of us was told to support the bar with one finger, each of us, okay? And our task was to lower the bar to the floor, but we couldn't ever lose touch with the bar. So what would you predict would happen? Is it slow? Is it fast? What happens? Have any of you done this exercise?
I've done a similar kind of thing. I forgot the outcome. I forget the outcome right now, but I would expect slow.
So the outcome is that the bar rises because everybody's trying to stay in touch with the bar. So by following instructions, the end objective was completely blown away. And that communicated to me just how clearly you could, be very micromanagement, very focused, very detail oriented, and have no clue how that could destroy your outcome. So to me, I always am more curious about sharing a vision, sharing that end state, sharing something rather than sharing a how or directing a how or prescribing how to get there. Over.
My experiences of feeling of sensing all of us really happened by accident, or at least I wasn't planning on it several years ago. So it was an experience. And after a while, I realized that was a very deep experience and it made a lot of stuff happen at a neurologic. I could feel the changes that occurred. And it wasn't, there weren't any instructions really. It was just an immersive learning experiment with a guitar student. And it just happened. We were trying to work something out. The one thing about it was that we had a problem that we were trying to solve. And everything came out of that. And it was also with someone I knew very well and had a lot of years of experience with. And it just happened. So there were no instructions really. Any instructions had been years ago. And so and ever since then, ever since I realized that I had that experience, I've just been following it and learning more about it so that I can talk to people. And it's very hard to talk to people about it. Most people just really aren't that interested in it. And so what are the key points is that, the key point for me is that it was an experience. And later on, I started finding out about some of the explanations and some of the big words about neurology to use with it and stuff like that. And I did learn a lot. And I wanted to learn more about it. What the heck am I experiencing? And in collaboration with other people, what is this that we're experiencing? So it started with an experience is my main point. And that first experience, which was about 2007, it's very specific when it happened. The other point about it was that it was for a purpose. We had a purpose, and we just invented our world around that and the space around it. And I never really had that kind of experience before, and that was just with 2 people. So that's the minimum. But it's so I don't want to. if I go any farther, I'll be getting off the track now, and I won't be feeling what we're all feeling. So I like to come back to that now.
So I'd like to just stop a moment and notice whether we did go off track there or not, just to examine it. I got a little bit lost in Ron's, in your, I mean, you made several points, and probably even one of those points I would like to have just sort of digested that, but several points I started getting feeling a little lost and hoping you wouldn't go on for too much longer. Not that what you said wasn't valuable and relevant. Heidi?
I would like to talk to Sam about this, holding the space. I, about 20 years, had a similar experience where I understood what holding the space might be. I was a choir director, and we had to do a concert, and there was no way to, the keyboard plug was broken, and so we should have done rehearsals and everything, and we couldn't. And I saw rising the nervousism in me. Everybody was asking, nervous, nervous, nervous. And there I realized I have to get calm down and be confident. And then everybody could come into the space which I had created then inside of myself, of not being nervous and trusting that somehow we will make, although we don't know. And so at the end, we could make a concert. And at the last moment, we also had a plug for the piano. But if I had bought into the nervous-ism, or how you say?
Nervousness.
Nervousness, yeah. Then it would have been a catastrophe. And for me, this was holding the space for 30 people, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you, Heidi. I very much understand what you just said. And by the way, Heidi, one conversation you and I have never had is I am also an orchestra director. I used to direct the children's orchestra, 10 to 12-year-olds, in various different places in Oregon, California, etc. But I use different words when I do what you describe. I don't use the words "I hold space." I use the words like, you know, I temper myself, or I calm myself, or I soothe myself, or I, you know, try and bring calm, or I try and connect in a calm way, or I try to dissipate the energy. So there's a number of other words, but this holding space idea to me is unnecessarily complex infrastructure in the metaphor, which itself is unnecessary structure probably, but just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a sort of a modern word, which 20 years ago nobody had when it happened to me. But it's not only that you calm yourself, but you see the necessity by your state of being that you have an emanation and influence others and invite them into your space. So in some way, I would agree that it is holding a space for them. But often it's used in a different way, slightly, yeah. Yeah, we should talk about music a little bit. There are 3 musicians here.
2 more seconds, Heidi. Brahms' Alto Rhapsody. Yeah.
Well, I find it interesting, that thought of, although I don't use the term holding space that much, I think I sort of get what it is, but it brings up the idea that can anybody really honestly speak for the group or know what the group needs? I mean, maybe all I can speak for is what I feel. So like I can safeguard or maintain my vibe, and I can be honest about if something throws it off. Like if something doesn't feel good, I can speak up and do something about that. And maybe that's helpful if I'm reasonably sort of cleanly present, whatever that is. But I kind of assume that somebody who's fairly present, their feeling of what's going on is helpful for the group. But is that the group field? I don't know. That's a little more mysterious, and we should probably, be careful of anybody sort of taking authority of knowing what the group wants and sort of criticizing others for not adhering to the group field or something. I mean, the group is whoever is there. So maybe it's more individual than it looks like.
But that's not necessarily holding the space, knowing what the group thinks. And I think nobody can know, but you can sense into it and have a vibe. And I think Hannah Lee is quite good in that. So we might have different abilities to do that. But I have a problem a little bit online, but in person, I find it much more easy because I can also see the movements and, you know, there's a little bit different. But holding the space. Let's hold the space of this hour.
For me, holding the space, in my experience, is more visceral. However, it's the individual part dissolves into the collective. So it's not about you anymore. You're just simply fully present. So you might call it different names. And if we look at holding something, it's just allowing it to be in the middle. I had a very interesting experience earlier when we all had to come forward. When I do that, it's impossible to sense into the space. Because suppose my core is blocked then because I'm forward. Then it's more into the mind, but simply my experience. And then the energy stops flowing, although it's fun.
I like those moments in silence where I take the time to look at people's faces. And occasionally you see a face go from contemplative to smile. And I kind of wonder at that point what happened. And about 8 or 9 seconds ago, Dave went from a very calm face to a smile. And I was wondering what just happened there.
What just happened? I was occasionally there's a little girl with Jazz that peeks at the camera kind of very shyly. She doesn't ever let her see her whole face, but she likes to peek around in the corner. She wants to know what's going on the screen. I was thinking about her. Where is she right now? And oh, there she is. Hi. Hello. Is it a she or is it's a, anyway, I think it's a girl. I couldn't tell.
They're all talking with you. Say
Pardon?
hello to everybody.
Hello.
Say hello. Say hello.
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 Hi.
Good to meet you. Hi.
Hi.
Tell them your name.
What?
Tell them your name
My name.
in the camera. There you are. Say, my name is Kurup Korkon. we've gone very shy.
Yeah. Hi. It's good to see you, though. You're welcome here, you know.
You're welcome. Okay.
Yes. You're very welcome. You could even have your own window if Jazz will let you.
Yeah, we could set that up.
Very
Yeah.
good conversations, I know.
Yeah. Do you know what we're doing?
Yep.
Does Jazz tell you about what we're doing? Experiments? And
No.
talking?
No, just that I'm in a meeting, and they're getting ready to go out to Punjabi school for the next couple of hours.
Oh, wow. Cool. I hope you have fun at school.
Yes. Children of this age have fun wherever they go, except when mommy tells them off.
Of course.
And I'm trying to instill a little bit of discipline that when I'm in the meeting, no, they're going in the car. That they shouldn't open the door and start jabbering at me straight away. They should pay a little attention to what's happening. It's going to take a few years. Oh, look, we've got a doggy.
So
And a cat. Look at that.
yeah, look at the cat and the dog and the Halloween costumes. You see the Halloween costumes?
Yeah. There's one. There's another.
Yeah.
There's the third one.
I can't see anymore. Come and have a look. Okay. This is.
All I have is a little happy Buddha for you.
Let me show you something else. This thing here
A baby.
is one of the most calming influences anywhere.
Jumpy.
I just fed it.
Look at all these kids. Whoa. Wow, you have a whole family around you.
These are the grandchildren. So this is part of the continuum
We have a mommy and a daddy.
as well. So it's part of the continuum for me to put something into them that they can use when I'm long
And we
gone.
watch Peter Pan.
Wow.
Peter Pan, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's so neat to meet everybody.
What?
That's Ron's Cogden. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to meet you. And Peter Pan is a favorite of mine.
Well, the one with Robin Williams as Hook. She's Han Venusia. And that's aldehyde Hornlene. Dave Gray. That's Han. Aldehyde. That's me. That's Ron. Dave. Fleming. And Sam with the dog. Okay, so can I have 5 minutes now?
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Can I have 5 minutes? Off you go, 5.
She said no.
Keep up clicking so they can hear you. Okay. The boy with the dog is called Sam.
Sam.
Speak up, I can't hear you.
This dog is Tia. Her name is Christia.
Can I tell him your name? No.
Her name is Raja.
Tell everybody your name. Oh, this one is called Ranjot Kaur. Sorry, I forgot to introduce this one. Ranjot Kaur. This is the older sister.
We need a wider lens, Jazz. We can't see your whole family.
It's
Zoom
We're
out.
not twins, we're sisters.
It's set on automatic and it seems to be picking up on my voice because I'm the one speaking at the moment. But it is an automatic wide angle lens.
We watch Peter Pan Hook.
So I'm just going to go off and ask them to give me a few minutes and then I'll pop back. Been a pleasure introducing my grandchildren to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you all.
It's great to meet them.
Thank you.
So now let's take a few minutes just to wrap up how we did. I mean, we're getting to sort of the end here, to sort of how we're doing on felt sense.
We're
And
just going to listen to what everybody has to say, and then we're going to say bye-bye. Okay, so let's be quiet. Thank you.
And I personally find it enjoyable with sort of minor distractions like kids and dogs and things that happen, or I enjoy when somebody's phone rings and something else happens. But again, sort of when there's a certain flow in it, it's a little something that happens, and then maybe it gives us another piece, or it makes something more real or something. And I like that part of it, that it weaves into what happens. But again, I suppose I have a certain sweet spot of where it works. So at some point, it might become too much. So like, don't know where exactly it is, but there's sort of a sense of, yeah, that's nice. That's cute. There's a little extra element. That's wonderful. Little piece of life. But still, I want to then sort of integrate it back into the topic or the silence or whatever. Yes.
I really just felt that it was being integrated when, Jazz, when you were naming everyone for the viewers there.
I just felt that I have to say something very important and pertinent here, is that children invoke our subconscious, which obviously climbs into the conscious as the more attention we pay to it. Because lots of the conversation I have with the older one now is, how do you know? And I say, well, I was a child once and I did the same things. So even at 6 months old, all that memory is in there somewhere and it can be invoked. And we just want, how shall I put this? I think within the last 70 odd years, we've started to squeeze, use an American phrase, we've started to squeeze a quart into a pint bottle. And I think we can go a lot further with that process than we've ever done before, because we have the means, and the mothers are now third, fourth generation educated. And we have memory systems that we've never had before. The memory systems we have over the last 10, 15 years, and especially the last 5 years, we can go forward at an exponential rate. Oh, there's a automatic lens mechanism kicking in right onto me. So I'm complete now.
So to finish the answer to the question that you asked Sam, because I wasn't quite done before the kids popped in. I didn't see any of the kids, but what I saw in Jazz's face was him connecting with them, and I wasn't sure what was happening, but I was enjoying the interaction that he was having, that I was imagining. And I also am noticing when the kids showed up, the pets, Heidi hold up her cat, Sam, you look so much happier and content than you did when you showed up an hour ago with your dog. Just like, you just look like, I want to be you right now.
By the way, Dave,
Yeah.
he is one of 5 in the house.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I also enjoy it. The chaos, the complexity.
And I like when it sort of gets back to silence, like when we're sort of, I ask for maybe let's sort of summarize this or something, or then we go into silence. That's actually, I think, a very good sign that we can all allow silence to happen. Is kind of tells me that it's on the right track, whatever that is.
It feels like an indicator of trust, actually, to me. if you're silent, it means you trust other people to say, not to hog it. You want to hear,
Yes, and unless somebody else has something to improve on the silence, I think that's probably a good point to.
I just wanted to come in and these experiences like seeing Sam with a dog or Jazz with the kids or seeing my cats around, they bring everything back to the ground. It's a sort of grounding experience. And I thank you very much for that session, because I was thinking, shall I come or shall I not? Because afterwards, in about an hour, I have a show in German about accompanying people in the death process. So that's much more serious, let's say. Hopefully it will be not too serious, but this has given me some, some light. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for showing up and making it that and practicing our felt sense of conversing. So have a wonderful day, all of you, and see you again another time. Bye, doggy.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Doggy.
Bye-bye.